When we hear the word king, our minds often conjure images of crowns, palaces, and thrones. But Carl Jung would tell us that this is far too literal. The king, in Jung's psychology, is not merely a figure from history or fairy tales. He is an archetype, an ancient symbol embedded deep in the collective unconscious. The king represents order, responsibility, vitality, and vision. Yet he also carries the potential for corruption, tyranny, and decay. This archetype lives within every human being, regardless of gender or background. It is the image of sovereignty within the psyche, the capacity to rule not over nations, but over the kingdom of one's own life. And this is where Jung's insight becomes so striking. Without the king inside us, without this inner center of order and meaning, we are left vulnerable to chaos. Think about your own experience. How often do people appear strong, successful, confident on the outside, while inside they are lost, fractured, full of doubt? They wear the mask of a king, but there is no throne within them. They project authority, but it is hollow, fragile, ready to collapse the moment life tests them. Jung would argue that they have not discovered their inner king, and when that happens, disorder seeps into every corner of life. The tragedy of the modern world is that we have forgotten this inner sovereignty. We mistake status for authority, wealth for power, likes and followers for legitimacy. But none of these things create true kingship. A million eyes upon you cannot give you the order you lack inside. Jung understood that real power, real purpose, emerges only when we integrate the archetype of the king consciously, when we accept responsibility for ourselves, our choices, and our vision of the future. The king is not just an authority figure. He is the axis of the psyche, the one who gives life structure and meaning. He blesses, he protects, he creates, he sustains. When the king archetype is alive within you, your life ceases to be a random collection of events. It becomes a kingdom. You become the one who decides what belongs and what does not, what flourishes and what must be pruned away. But the king is not only light, he has a shadow, and this shadow is always close, waiting to take over if we fail to claim our inner throne. Ignore the king within you, and he will not disappear. He will return in distorted form, either as the tyrant who dominates and destroys, or as the weak king who avoids responsibility and lets his kingdom fall apart. We see both forms all around us. Leaders who crush freedom because they fear losing control, individuals who shrink from responsibility because they fear failure. Both are expressions of the king denied, the crown abandoned. The king within us must be claimed, or his shadow will rule in our place, and claiming him is not a matter of arrogance or pride, it is a matter of maturity. To sit on the throne of your own life means to face the trials, the burdens, and the discipline that kingship requires. It means taking ownership of the chaos inside, transforming it into order, and radiating that order outward. This is not easy. It is, in fact, the greatest initiation of life. For before you can wear the crown, you must walk through the fire of your own insecurities, your hunger for approval, your fear of rejection. But only through this passage does the true king awaken. Every one of us carries this archetype. The question is not whether you have it, the question is whether you will live it. Because the moment you awaken the king inside you, you are no longer a pawn on the board of life. You become the one who moves the pieces. You stop waiting for permission. You stop drifting in confusion. You become sovereign. And this is just the beginning, for the story of the king is not only about light and strength, it is also about shadow. To truly think with power and purpose, you must face the dark side of the crown. That is where we will go next. Every crown casts a shadow. Jung knew that no archetype exists without its darker twin, and the king is no exception. The king symbolizes order, vitality, and blessing, but when distorted, he becomes something else entirely. He becomes the tyrant, or he collapses into the weak king. Both shadows emerge when the throne inside is left unguarded. The tyrant is driven by fear. Though he may appear powerful, his authority is hollow, and deep down he knows it. He is terrified of losing control, terrified of being seen as weak, terrified of the chaos within himself. To cover this insecurity, he projects domination. He demands obedience. He silences dissent. He devours the very people he is meant to protect. The tyrant does not bless, he curses. He does not give life, he drains it. And because he cannot face his own vulnerability, he punishes anyone who reminds him of it. History is filled with these figures, but if we are honest, we have all felt the tyrant inside ourselves. that moment when we try to control others because we are afraid of losing control of ourselves. On the other side of the shadow is the weak king. He avoids responsibility. He hesitates, delays, and hopes someone else will carry the burden for him. He hides behind excuses, behind indecision, behind passivity. While the tyrant destroys by force, the weak king destroys by neglect. His kingdom rots not because he was cruel, but because he refused to act. This too is something we see everywhere. People who sense they are capable of more but shrink away from their own potential because the weight of responsibility terrifies them. The tragedy is that both shadows come from the same source, the refusal to claim the throne of the self. When the archetype of the king is ignored, it doesn't vanish, it mutates. If you do not take your place as ruler of your own life, something else will take it for you. Your fear may become a tyrant. Your doubt may become a weak king. Either way, you are ruled, not ruling. And this is not just a personal struggle. Entire societies reflect the shadow of the king. When a culture lacks mature leadership, when responsibility is abandoned, the void is filled by counterfeit kings. Charismatic manipulators, hollow authorities, leaders who disguise weakness with bluster or cloak tyranny in promises of order. People follow them not because they are true kings, but because the people themselves have forgotten the king within. A shadow king can only rise when a people have abandoned their own sovereignty. But Jung did not teach us to despair at the shadow. He taught us to integrate it. The path forward is not to deny that you have a tyrant within you, or that part of you sometimes wants to abdicate responsibility. The path is to see it clearly, to admit it without shame, and to bring it into the light of consciousness. Because only then can you choose differently. Only then can you act from strength rather than from fear. Facing the shadow of the king is not pleasant. It forces you to see your hunger for control, your fear of failure, your temptation to hide from responsibility. But this confrontation is not a punishment. It is an initiation. It is the test every king must endure before he can truly wear the crown. The shadow reminds us of what is at stake. It shows us how fragile the line is between sovereignty and destruction. And it warns us that if we do not take the throne consciously, the shadow will rule in our place. To become a true king, you must pass through this darkness. You must admit the tyrant in you. You must recognize the weak king in you, and then you must choose not to serve them. Only then does the path to the mature king open. Only then do you begin to embody power that does not destroy, but creates. Once the shadow is faced, the true work begins, the birth of the mature king. Unlike the tyrant or the weak king, the mature king does not need to prove himself. He does not demand recognition, nor does he cling to titles. His power comes from within. You know when you are in his presence because you feel a sense of order, of calm, of clarity. He does not have to shout. He does not have to posture. His authority is real because it is rooted in the center of his being. But how does one arrive at this state? The mature king is not born from privilege or from external validation. He is forged through trial, through struggle, through the conscious acceptance of responsibility. He emerges when a man or woman stops running from their fears and begins to face them directly. The crown is not given, it is earned, and the price is always self-mastery. The mature king embodies three essential functions. First, he brings order. Not rigid, lifeless order, but structure that allows life to flourish. He can take chaos within himself, within his family, within his work, and shape it into something meaningful. Second, he blesses. To bless means to give life, to affirm, to inspire. When people are around the mature king, they feel elevated, seen, strengthened. And third, he protects, not through fear or intimidation, but by creating a space where justice, fairness, and dignity can exist. Yet these functions are fragile. Order can turn into suffocating rigidity. Blessing can turn into arrogance. Protection can turn into domination. What separates the mature king from his shadow is awareness. He knows these temptations live within him, but he chooses to balance them instead of denying them. His strength lies not in perfection, but in integration. A true king accepts responsibility as the central fact of his existence. He does not look for someone else to blame. He does not avoid the weight of the crown. He shoulders it willingly, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because he knows that responsibility is the foundation of dignity. Without responsibility, there is no sovereignty. The mature king also understands that his reign is not about him alone. His greatness is measured by how much life he brings forth in others. He is not threatened by the strength or brilliance of those around him. In fact, he delights in it. A tyrant wants others to remain small so he can feel big. A true king wants others to grow because his own strength is secure. This is why people follow him, not out of fear but out of trust. And perhaps the most profound trait of the mature king is his ability to remain centered in the storm. Criticism does not break him. Praise does not intoxicate him. Loss does not shatter him. Success does not blind him. His center is not in the shifting opinions of the crowd, but in the inner order he has built brick by brick. This is not an easy path. To become the mature king, you must die to the illusions of your ego. You must sacrifice the craving for constant approval. You must let go of the fantasy that someone else will come and save you. You must accept that the throne is yours alone, and no one else can sit on it for you. The mature king is not flawless. He makes mistakes, he suffers, he struggles. But he learns, he adapts. And because he accepts responsibility for his failures, his people, whether his family, his community, or simply those around him, grow stronger through him. To embody this archetype is to live with sovereignty, clarity, and purpose. The crown is not a symbol of dominance over others. It is the sign that you have taken dominion over yourself. And when that happens, everything changes. But kingship is not meant to remain private. The mature king does not live only in the heart. He must step into the world. He must bring his sovereignty into action, into relationships, into the structures of society itself. That is the next stage of the journey. The king is not meant to remain hidden within. Once awakened, his presence must be lived in the world. This does not mean seizing a throne or commanding armies. It means embodying sovereignty in every interaction, every decision, every space you step into. A true king is recognized not by his crown, but by his presence. When a person carries the mature king within, something shifts. They do not walk into a room seeking approval. They do not posture or pretend. Their very being changes the atmosphere. People feel more grounded around them, more centered, more seen. The king does not need to demand attention. It is given freely because others sense the authority that comes from within. In relationships, the king is not a tyrant and not an absent figure. He is steady, reliable, someone others can depend on. His strength does not suffocate, it stabilizes. He does not need to control because his presence already provides security. His partner, his friends, his children, they feel safe not because he dominates them, but because he stands firmly in who he is. The king does not shrink when things get hard. He remains, he supports, he guides. In work and leadership, the king reveals himself not through orders barked or titles flaunted, but through inspiration. He sees the gifts in others and calls them forth. He creates environments where growth is possible. People follow him not because they fear punishment, but because they trust his vision. A king does not compete with those he leads, he elevates them. His success is measured not by how many bow before him, but by how many rise beside him. Yet living the king in the world also requires boundaries. A true king knows that to say yes to what matters, he must say no to what corrupts. He does not compromise his integrity for approval. He does not betray his principles for comfort. When faced with pressure, he stands firm, even if he stands alone, because the king understands that without boundaries, his kingdom falls to ruin. This is why the king is often misunderstood, even resented. In a world addicted to chaos, distraction, and shallow approval, true sovereignty can feel threatening. The man or woman who carries the king archetype becomes a mirror to others, showing them not only what they could be, but what they have refused to become. And mirrors are uncomfortable. People may try to tear him down, mock him, or question his worth. But none of this matters, because the king's authority does not depend on external applause. His crown is rooted in the soul. What is extraordinary is how contagious this archetype is. The king who lives his sovereignty inspires others to discover their own. His presence awakens dormant potential in those around him. He does not need to preach or convince. His life itself becomes a form of leadership. And so his kingdom extends, not as territory, but as influence, as inspiration, as an invisible field where others feel empowered to rise. This is why Jung insisted that the archetype of the king is not a relic of ancient times. It is as relevant today as ever. Our society does not suffer from a lack of kings in palaces. It suffers from a lack of kings in spirit. People who live without inner sovereignty become easy prey for manipulation. But one individual who embodies the king can shift an entire group simply by refusing to abandon his center. To live as the king in the world is not to dominate, but to embody dignity. It is to bring order where there is confusion, to bring stability where there is fear, to bring blessing where there is despair. It is to let your sovereignty ripple outward in a way that others cannot ignore. And yet there is still one final step. For the king's journey is not only about awakening and living his power, it is about sustaining it. To think like a king means to live every day with power and purpose, not just in moments of clarity, but as a way of being. And that is where our path now leads. The question remains, how do you not just awaken the king within, but live as him every single day? How do you think like a king, steadily, purposefully, powerfully, without collapsing into the shadows of tyranny or weakness? Jung would remind us that kingship is not a permanent state. It is not a trophy you win once and then keep forever. It is a discipline, a way of being that must be chosen and renewed every single day. Thinking like a king means that with every decision, every challenge, every trial, you return to your center and take responsibility. Not because it is easy, not because it always feels good, but because it is the only path that leads to sovereignty. To think like a king is to think beyond the moment. Ordinary thought is consumed by comfort, by impulse, by immediate gratification. The king thinks in terms of meaning. He asks, what endures? What matters beyond today? What will remain after I am gone? This shift in perspective transforms everything. It makes small sacrifices bearable because they are tied to a greater vision. It makes pain meaningful because it is part of something larger than the self. But thinking like a king is not only about vision, it is also about action. A king does not get lost in endless reflection. He decides. He acts. He accepts the consequences. He does not wait for perfect certainty because he knows it will never come. He understands that the absence of action is more dangerous than the risk of failure. Every day, he chooses movement over paralysis, clarity over confusion, direction over drift. At the same time, this king never forgets his shadow. He knows the tyrant still whispers, urging him to dominate, to control, to crush. He knows the weak king still lurks, tempting him to retreat, to abdicate, to hide. Thinking like a king means listening to those voices, but refusing to serve them. It means using awareness as a shield against corruption. It means holding the crown with humility, knowing how easily it can slip. The true mark of thinking like a king is the willingness to learn. He does not mistake the crown for perfection. He expects to fail at times, to misjudge, to fall short, but he refuses to let those failures define him. He transforms them into wisdom. A tyrant cannot admit mistakes, and a weak king cannot face them, but the mature king grows stronger through them. And perhaps most importantly, to think like a king is to think not only of oneself, but of the whole. His mind is not trapped in the cage of ego. He measures success not by how much he gains, but by how much life he gives. He asks, did I bring order where there was chaos? Did I bring strength where there was fear? Did I help others rise, or did I keep them down? This shift of focus from self to service is what makes the king's purpose so enduring. The reward for living this way is not applause. It is not status. It is freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of insecurity. Freedom from the hunger for validation. Freedom from the endless cycle of comparison and fear. The king thinks like a sovereign because he is one. He does not wait for permission. He does not beg for recognition. He knows who he is, and from that knowledge flows his power. In the end, the crown was never something external. It was never given by society, never handed down by fate. It has always been within you, waiting for you to claim it. To think like a king is to remember that truth, to act from it, and to live every day with power and purpose. The world does not need more rulers. It does not need more tyrants or more weak kings who abdicate responsibility. What the world needs are true sovereigns, men and women who have faced their shadow, embraced responsibility, and learned to think like kings. And that can begin with you. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more deep insights. Your support helps us grow this community of thinkers.